Hello, everyone, and hello, dear Panayotis. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. So our conversation will be in English, and some of our guests have headphones with translation. So after our conversation and after the concert, they will be able to ask you some questions. And I welcome you. I'm pleased to welcome you at the Biomechanics Festival. And today, this is our first time where we are doing this hybrid format, because it's a pre-concert talk with the composer and a talk which followed by a concert. So it is a part of the program of Biomechaniке.Extra, where leading composers working in the field of electroacoustic music and multimedia talk about their practice. And today we are happy to introduce you our guest, our first guest, a composer and researcher, Panayotis Kokorас. You might have heard his pieces played already on some of our concerts, and he participated at our conference 2 years ago, I think. And our meeting today will be structured as follows. At the beginning, we will talk with Panayotis. We'll discuss some of his pieces that you will heard, and then our musicians, ensemble CEAM Artists, the ensemble of Center Electroacoustic Music, will perform his works. And at the end of the meeting, you can ask some questions. And you can ask it in Russian, and we will help you to translate it. So, I think for now, let's get into the conversation. Hello, Panayotis. We are very happy to be able to talk with you tonight. And first of all, I would like to congratulate you on being named Regent Professor. I know that it was some days ago.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And first of all, thank you for inviting me, and thanks to Nikolai, to Alexander, and to your help, Rina. So yeah, that was recent news, and I'm very happy about it.
Oh, thank you. And my first question will be about your work at the university. You are the professor of University of North Texas, and you director of the Center for Experimental Music and Intermedia. And could you please tell us a little bit about working there, and what this center is doing, and what is focused on?
Of course, my pleasure. So, yeah, I teach at the University of North Texas, the College of Music, which is one of the biggest in the country, perhaps the biggest music college in the US. It has nearly 1,200 students. And one section of the College of Music is the CEMI, the Center for Experimental Music and Intermedia. So CEMI consists of some sort of a main concert hall and 4 studios. The main concert hall has a 37.2 sound dome, 37 speakers and 2 subwoofers in the form of a hemisphere. So in this place we can project up to 5th order ambisonics or any kind of multi-channel work we want. It has 5 screens. It's 220 degrees immersion, and of course moving lights and microphones and mixers. So it's a high-tech facility where we can do all sort of intermedia, multimedia works. And then we have the studios where students can work, prepare their projects before maybe they move to the main concert hall to perform them.
Mm-hmm. And do you work with only composers, or at your center there are some artists or engineers? How does it work?
Yeah, so SEM is a student-based center, research center. So I have 5 to 7 doctoral students, composers, and they are trained and they run the facility. So it's based on doctoral students in composition who are running the tech and do all the work there, the maintenance and upgrades and anything we need to do. So it's primarily for composers, but of course we do work with visual artists rather regularly, and with performers. So we often do, like you do there, pieces for instruments and electronics, or pieces for multimedia involving projection, cameras, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. How did you develop your interest in electroacoustics, and what was the starting point of your work in this field?
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that will sound a little bit funny, but when I was a student, like middle school, high school student, my idols were people like Jean-Michel Jarre, if you know him. He's a French electronic sort of composer. Vangelis, he's Greek origin. Also, he lived in France for many years, film composer, but he was doing a lot of electronic music projects. So these are the people who were accessible to me as a student more, and I was kind of admiring. Of course, then when I went to college, I learned more about other people like Xenakis, Stockhausen, and so on. And there in college, where I got introduced to actual electroacoustic music of Pierre Schaeffer, musique concrète, and all the developments in electroacoustic music. So as a student, I had no clue about actual electroacoustic student before college. So when I went to college, I got to know. And however, I always had an interest in technology. I bought my first synthesizer, a Roland, when I was high school. And that was all time. So it was kind of a new thing nonetheless. And I bought my first computer again in high school, which was an Atari. The PC computers were not yet known, you know. So I was always a lover of technology, and eventually I found my way.
So great. If I understand correctly, your process of creating compositions is strongly connected with your research. Is it so?
It's totally. And that happens in the pre-composition part, before I even begin composing. It happens during the composition, and of course, when the pieces are performed, right? Even if I have a piece which is just acoustic piece, just for an instrument, there is a lot of technology involved in the beginning. So I will analyze the sounds. I will try to then experiment with the instrument, change maybe the instrument. In many of my pieces, I use instrumental prosthetics. These are little devices. Most of them are 3D printed that I use together with the instrument. For example, in all my pieces that I use clarinet or saxophone, single reed, I use a reed that I have developed, which is a synthetic reed. Actually, maybe I can show you here. I have one just in front of me. So this is the reed, right? So this is it's high tech. It has no cables, but it was not possible a few years ago to do something like that. So that shows a little bit how I'm thinking about technology and how actually technology fuses and becomes one with the tradition.
Mm-hmm. I highly recommend to our audience to visit your website, because there are a lot of materials, there are a lot of your works, and research, some very interesting articles about electronic music and process of composing. But I was surprised to see a lot of text, a lot of words on your site when you write some topics with whom you work. I was interested in topic zoomusicology, if I'm correct.
Sure.
Could you please tell us about this term?
Absolutely. Yes. This term exists. It's actually a musicological sort of section, but it's very, very small. Not very many musicologists are interested in zoomusicology. So I'm fascinated by the animal vocalizations and the sounds they make. One of my recent pieces is called Porcupine. Porcupine is a little bit, it has thorns. It's a little mammal. And it makes amazing sounds. So similarly, I will gather sounds from the animal vocalizations and then analyze them, and then try to figure out a way, how can I reproduce them with an instrument? And if you see my list of works, there is a lot of pieces that even in their title they have the name, like hippo, rhino, and chimp, or other pieces that do not have really an animal title, but actually they're connected to it.
It's very interesting, and I think after the concert we'll have opportunity to listen.
Maybe I will give you an example for that. My theory is, long time ago, human beings were in the forests and the jungles, and perhaps they had their shaman, the magician, making certain animal vocalizations with the voice and movements to scare, for example, the lions, or to bring rain. And they will imitate sounds from the nature, sounds from the animal kingdom and sounds from the rain, the wind. And eventually we forgot about all this. That's how, and they were musicians actually. They were, part of their role was to play music and sing and dance. We went into churches and we closed the doors and we couldn't hear anymore the nature, right?
Yeah.
And then the churches became maybe castles and then concert halls. And we forgot about it. So with this way, I kind of bring back the animals and the nature into the music and reconnect that wall.
Yeah, sounds great. And my last question will be about the piece that we will listen in a few minutes. So the first piece will be Shatter Cone. Could you please tell us about this piece?
Sure. Well, I wrote this piece. It was a commission from a festival in New York City called MATA. Perhaps still running this festival. And I wrote specifically for a violinist called Mari Kimura. She's pioneering works for violin and electronics. And she premiered the piece in this festival. So, as the title suggests, Shatter Cone is a formation that happens in materials, mostly rocks, when they are under increased pressure, like in volcanic activity or meteorites. And then there's a formation on the rocks. So I thought the same way as the bow plays on the strings, it kind of shapes the string and it leaves some sort of mark. So the piece involves a lot of special techniques for the bow with slow bowing and different pressures and specific movements of the left hand as well to kind of simulate that phenomenon of the creation of a shatter cone.
Yes, it's very interesting to know how does it sound. So, and the next piece will be for flute and electronics, Mosaicing, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, mosaicing. It's perhaps you know the word mosaics, which is you make a big maybe floor or could be a painting out of small little rocks, let's say, colorful. It was quite common in the ancient times. And nowadays there is a technique in computer music where you make a new sound out of small pieces of other sounds. So, for example, I can use my voice, make it very small pieces, and then reproduce my voice again out of in different order out of this small piece I already analyzed and segmented. So that's what happens in the process of the electronics with the flute, and it's fundamental in the nature of the piece. So the title comes from that, and it's written for flutist here in UNT, Elizabeth McNutt, who is a professor here, a flute professor, and she's pioneering pieces for flute and electronics.
Yes, and the last piece will be for flute, cello, percussion, and electronics, and the name is Morphallaxis.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this piece I wrote it as a part of a research project at IRCAM. I was working at IRCAM for several seasons on sound analysis and synthesis and score following techniques. So this is a product of this research. And one of the things is that I was looking for a very specific percussion sound, kind of a big, low sound, but at the same time very fragile and fast. And I was thinking for a timpani. I was not happy with a timpani or a tom-tom. Eventually, I came up with a hand drum, which is a pretty big, thin percussion instrument found in various traditional musics. And that makes the piece quite characteristic. And also the sticks that the piece is played with are very thin sticks that are not common in percussion music. They're not like standard percussion sticks, but they are very thin and elastic sticks, things that I normally like integrating in my music. Yeah, this piece was premiered in Paris by Ensemble Alternance.
Thank you, Panayotis, for your great, beautiful presentation of your pieces. And now I would like to invite on the stage our musicians, Ensemble CEAM Artists, and then we will continue with questions from our audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll continue our conversation. And first of all, I would like to thank CEAM Artists for this very energetic performance. And of course, I would like to thank you, Panayotis, for this beautiful, extremely animalistic and exotic, in some way, music. Can you hear us? I think we have some problems because we don't hear you. Just a second. Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Just a moment, we have some technical. We are waiting for your questions. If you would like to ask something, you can make it now. Feel free to ask something about the Panayotis works and some of his pieces and music style, his experience in electroacoustic music. So. Yes, of course. So we have the first question.
Okay.
We can hear you.
You hear me?
Great.
Okay, great.
So the question was, how many time do you need to write these pieces?
I would say I'm considering myself as a slow composer. For example, for Morphallaxis, perhaps it took me 600 hours to compose it. If I can quantize it this way, it normally takes me a while, and of course there is periods where I want to compose every day, all day long, maybe 10, 12 hours a day. But then there is periods where I will not compose for a day or two because I'm doing other things, and then it slows down the progress. But I do a lot of experimentation, lots of trial, error, trial. I say that the tool of the composer is not the pencil, but is the eraser. I erase a lot more than finally I keep, So I produce a lot of music, but in the end I just keep, what you hear, which is a rather small amount from what I created.
Thank you. Some more questions?
Я тоже по-русски спрошу.
Okay.
Hi, thank you.
I will translate.
Существует ли какая-то парадигма восприятия природы в рамках композиторской практики? И какой инструментарий рецепции того, что оно из себя представляет, как ее воспринимать, и какие средства актуальны ее репрезентировать или с ней разговаривать?
So the question is, how can composers escape nature and make research in this field, and how can they represent nature in the work? And which instruments do they use?
И парадигма, то есть на что опирается композитор, говоря о природе? Есть ли какая-то между ними специальная какая-то теория? Меня слышат? Я могу сам спросить.
Yes, of course.
And do you know maybe in composers professional community is some paradigm to understand nature and recept it and представлять in present. And what tools do you have now? What its actual contemporary tools? Thank you.
Yes, from what I understand, the tools we have now is perhaps the recorder. We can record things, right? It's not very special tool, in fact, but that's something we have, and we can actually study the animal vocalizations. We can repeat them. We can analyze them because we have them recorded, and we can figure out what's their pitch counter. How wide is the glissando they do? For example, if you have I don't know, an elk or a hippo, how fast they do their grunting sounds. Hippos do normally sound like ooh, 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 or something like that. This is their alphabet, let's say. So how fast is this? With tempo, let's say 78, is it like, how could I notate this? So I can represent the sound on normally I use Adobe Audition. It's an audio editing software, which has a very nice way of sound representation with sonograms. And there I can see on time how the vocalization is articulated, as well as the harmonic content of it, what kind of pitches are and how they move in time. So this is a rather simple tool, but it's still very, very useful and important today. So that's how I begin my
recording in progress.
My research, let's say. But the most important part is if I don't, I need to modify the instruments, either find new ways of playing the instruments, new techniques, new sounds. Otherwise, I will have to stick with the notes and the rhythms, which are not going to take me too far. For instance, if you hear Vivaldi's Four Seasons it's a programmatic music. There is behind the music, there is a little story. And there is moments where he describes nature, he describes animals, but the music is still scales and notes. That's what he had at that time. Nowadays, we have a lot more than that. We have a much more expanded palette of sounds from the instruments, and we have also the electronics, where we can expand even more the sound world. We can have soundscapes, we can have processed sounds, and we can build exactly the world we're imagining. I hope that answers a little bit of the question.
Well, thank you for your question. Yes, please take a microphone.
Здравствуйте, большое спасибо за концерт, если можно так его назвать, перформанс. Мой вопрос касается произведения «Мозаика», я не знаю, как правильно на русском языке его произносить, «Мозаичность». И вопрос в следующем. Вы говорили про античность, у вас есть ассоциация между мозаикой и античностью. И когда начался перформанс, девушка-музыкант вышла с флейтой, и у меня сразу возникла ассоциация между фавном или паном, да, и флейтой или свирелью, на которой он традиционно играл. И пока я слушала, у меня эта ассоциация неизменно сохранялась. Есть ли какая-то связь между флейтой и античностью здесь, или она случайная и просто еще одна свободная моя личная ассоциация? Спасибо.
The question is about the second piece, Mosaicing. Is there some antique association with faven, with flute, and something like this?
Yes. Well, a lot of my music is full of this kind of associations of mental images. So in my music, I play normally with three elements. One is the spectrum morphology, where I play with the spectrum of the sound and how I change and morph it, like the sound of the instruments. That's spectromorphology. And then it's transcontextuality, right? That means how I transform the context of the sound. So it may be a sound, a kick-lick sound of the flute, for example, that I then transform that into footsteps, or I make it sound like people eating on a table and we hear the spoons and the forks. And that's how I transform the sound, the meaning of the sound. And by then transforming the meaning, then I can transform the sound itself. So it's an interesting way to create cohesion without necessarily dealing with the sound itself. For example, if I have a movement, right, and I want to change that movement radically, suddenly I want to change the music to something a little bit different. If I have a sound that sounds like you turn a page of the book, immediately that sound gives you the message that we're changing page. And although this sound is not really close to what happens in the instruments, it's connected and gives you a message and transforms the context of the music and the sound. So that's transcontextuality, which is happening a lot in my music. And the other is spatiomorphology, which has to do with the spatial sound. If we have multiple speakers, especially with only electronics, where sound is placed around the whole. So these are the three elements I mostly work with. And I think the question is referring to transcontextuality, how I use all these associations and meanings and symbols, and I play with them using sound as my medium. I don't tell stories. I just make sounds. And that's very important in my work, indeed.
Thank you. And thank you for the performance. I didn't translate this part of the question. So, do you have any questions? Yes, please take a microphone.
Hello, Panayotis. Firstly, thank you so much for your pieces, for your art, and of course, big thank to CEAM Center. My question is about the light and color. In today's performance, CEAM Center used the light as a part of performance, and for me it's interesting. What do you think about the light when you write something? Do you see some colors, light or something, like scrubbing, for example? So that's my question.
Yes, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't call myself a synesthetic composer, but I think every human being has this ability to relate senses. And my goal is with my music is, I call my music sound compositions, and I compose sound. I am sound. Sometimes I feel like I'm the sound, right? I'm not separated from this. I'm one with it. And the sound, it doesn't need a second sound to make sense. One sound can be completely satisfying and completely fulfilling to me, and I hope to you too, which is not the case with a note. Just a note alone is not having anything to tell you. You need at least one more note. So then you start making connections, right? And relationships. But the sound is self-sufficient, and one sound can bring to me memories, can bring to me images, smells, lights, as you said, it meanings, of course, emotions. So let's say hearing the sound of the water running, right? Everybody will just have a different way of imagining that. And that's beautiful for me. I believe that everybody is experiencing something a little bit different, depending on your memories and your experiences. And again, the vehicle for me is not necessarily the light. I'm not composing light, I compose sound, but the sound gives me also information about light. So if you hear, let's say, a nightingale bird, that's already has a color in it, right? And puts me into a specific mood and context. So color is very important. And I loved also the setup of the stage from CEAM. And I believe, yes, to reproduce nicely a musical experience, it's important to have the right environment for it as well. So I hope that answers a little bit your question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I have a second question. Which books do you recommend to your student?
Yeah, well, there's so many books I could recommend. One of the, it depends on depending on the student. When I'm talking to more advanced students, perhaps the Thousand Plateaus by Guattari and Deleuze and Guattari. It's a good book to read. It's philosophy. It's a philosophical book. I believe the music is philosophical art. The problem is not to learn techniques or technology or things like that. Is to solve the philosophical problem. Why this kind of music? Why music? And these are philosophical questions, are not technical questions. So I think the answer to it, it's philosophical, and I certainly encourage them to read philosophy. Of course, some books from Plato and Aristotle are always handy, as I feel them very close to me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Oh, yeah. We have a question from our musician, flautist.
Hello.
Perform your piece.
Yes, thank you very much. It's so great to play your wonderful music. Thank you. I'm flutist Maria, and my question is about flute sound. What do you think about flute sounds? Do you think about it like part of electronic music, something like that, or it's first flute sound and second it is like something between?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful performances. I really loved your performances. Well, flute or clarinet or anything for me, it's nothing but sounds. Okay, a flute for me, it represents a set of sounds. That in the case of flute, in order to produce them, you have to blow on the specific hole with specific angles, and they have a specific length. But for me, what it remains is the sound of the flute and what sounds I can make with the flute. Therefore, in my mind, there's no distinction between instruments or even with electronics. I can use the flute to make a sound of wind. I can use a recorded wind to make it sound like flute, right? So there's no difference. They're all sounds in my mind. And if I'm thinking then of flute, I'm thinking of a specific number of sounds, right, that the flute, I think, can do. And of course, I'm always looking for new sounds that flute could do. That's a very important part for me, because if I compose with sounds, I compose sounds, therefore I need sounds, right? The more sounds I have, the more things I can express. So flute sounds in this case, right? So for me, there's no distinction between electronics or flute. It's all about the sound qualities I can get from both. And they're all one continuum, one world of sounds.
So, thank you. We have one more question.
Хотела спросить, по-русски, если можно.
Да, конечно.
Что для вас первично, акустический звук или электроакустический? Или же, вот меня интересует в первой и во второй пьесе, или же электроакустика, она является здесь как бы продолжением акустического звука? Вот как вы эти пьесы для себя трактуете? Спасибо.
So the question is how the sounds are related to each other, acoustic and electroacoustic. What is the main component of the sound? Could it be electroacoustic completely or just acoustic sound?
When I compose in my music, in general.
In your music, yes.
Well, yes. The way I compose sounds, it's the same. I don't, as I said, the medium is not the message. There is this philosophical concept maybe that well, here we have a cello and we play the cello and we hear the sound of the cello, right? And therefore the medium, the cello, it gives us the message that here I am, I'm the cello, listen to me. For me, the sound is the message. And as I said, with the cello, I can make a sound that sounds like footsteps, pressing the bow on the body. And therefore, the message is now no more the cello, because I don't make cello sounds. I use the cello to make footstep sounds. So that's quite fundamental. And then I use these sounds to either combine them, and I use music information retrieval techniques, or maybe simpler techniques that gives me similarities or queries. I can say, okay, here's a sound. What are other similar sounds to it, spectrally, right? And for example, I can put into the computer a cello sound, like normal, and then the computer, I have a huge database of sounds, has all of them analyzed, will tell me, oh, here there is a sound very close to it, very similar. And that sound might not be even a cello sound, might be an old radio recording that a singer sings, but sounds actually close to the cello sound I have. So the algorithm will not distinguish anymore. The computer doesn't know if this is a cello or a human singing, but it looks for the similarities in terms of the sound, the timbre. And then this is one way to structure and to organize my sounds in terms of similarity. I have the similar sounds, and then I have non-similar sounds. So if I have two very similar sounds together, they fuse and they become one. And it's hard for you, for our perception, to distinguish those two different sounds. They become one. And that's where I call my music holophonic musical texture. Becomes holophonic. They fuse together. If I use one sound that here and one which is very different, timbrally, then they separate and they cannot fuse. And then you can create some sort of counterpoint. You have two layers of sounds that our perception can easily distinguish. So these are tools that I use to control and to organize my sounds. Timbre similarity.
Thank you so much. Do we have some more questions? I think no. So thank you so much, Panayotis, for this beautiful conversation and for your music, of course. And thank you for participating in our festival. We are great to see you here. Thank you so much.
One more question. Maybe.
We have
one more question.
Sorry.
Thank you, Panayotis. Thank you for the pieces, for your talk. And last year, or maybe I saw your... Переводите, пожалуйста. Да,
Okay.
я видел ваш доклад. Please translate. Я видел ваш доклад про фаб-синтез, про вот эту технологию, и был впечатлен в первую очередь теоретической работой, даже формулировкой этого метода, который, ну, так или иначе мы все его используем в том или ином виде. И хотелось бы узнать, продолжаете ли вы работу именно теоретическую над этим методом, и можно ли ознакомиться с ним в каких-то ресурсах?
The question is about your research method, about fab synthesis, because Alec visited your presentation at the conference 2 years ago, I think it was. Yes, and he would like to ask you, do you continue to work on this method, and where we can read something about this method more?
Yes, I do continue.
Unfortunately, we have some problems with sound. Just a second, we'll check it.
Okay?
Yes, it's okay now.
All right.
Sorry.
So maybe I will briefly repeat. So yeah, continue working on fab synthesis, and currently developing devices, little electronic devices. Some of them will rotate and use plectrums or strings to trigger objects, sonic objects. Others will hit. Others will create friction. So mostly motorized transducers and solenoids and things like that. So the goal is to create a set of tools for the composer to use them like an instrument, like maybe a mallet or something like that, to trigger sounds, but in a more sophisticated way than it's possible with just our hands. So that's part of the fab synthesis paradigm. So hopefully, once I have a few of them in a final stage, they will be uploaded on my website. So that's where you will know more about it in the near future.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
I'm really recommend you to visit the site of Panayotis. There's full of different articles on different topics. So thank you so much, Panayotis.
I would like also to thank you all, Irina, and the CEAM, and everybody who joined tonight the concert. Also here, it's not night yet, it's 12:30 midday. And wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.